Hello, all, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your weekly look at the IT news of the week. I'm your host and editor with Gestalt IT, Rich Straffolino. Joining me across this great land of ours from his exclusive studios in the great state of Oklahoma is the one, the only, the networking nerd himself, Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hello, Rich. It's a pleasure to be back on from my exclusive studios that I share with a slightly larger family that, you know, lives here.
It's exclusive to your family, so I think we can go with that. But Tom, really important. Want to dive right into what is going on. We have some breaking news, and I'm excited to get to it right now. Ookla, the company behind speedtest.net, you might not be familiar with the company, but you probably know speedtest.net, announced the acquisition of wireless design and planning company Ekahau. Tom, you got the inside story of this, and we just published a piece on this on Gestalt IT literally just before the show started. Why is Ookla getting into kind of the wireless design and tooling game there?
So I had an opportunity to talk to Yussi from Ekahau first thing this morning. He was literally thrilled beyond belief to call me with the news. And it was great because he said that Ookla had been looking to acquire some companies that had some good talent and were kind of interested in the Wi-Fi game. And the more they discussed it, the more they realized it was a good cultural fit for both of them. You probably sit there and say to yourself, well, why would a speed test website really care about Wi-Fi analytics? If you're thinking that, you should totally go check out what Ookla does. Spoiler alert, it's more than just testing internet speeds. Ookla has a lot of enterprise-focused things that are designed to help enterprise IT test their network connectivity, test their latency across large sites. And as we found out, the edge of the network is really becoming more focused on wireless. And unless you have specialized wireless knowledge, that's a difficult thing to do. And thankfully, Ekahau has been spending the last 10 years developing that. I went back and Ekahau presented at Wireless Field Day 2, something like 6 years ago. So obviously they've been doing this for quite a while.
Well, and this brings up an interesting point because, Ekahau being a Wireless Field Day alumni, it kind of reminds me a little bit of a more recent Mobility Field Day alumni, NetScout, who recently divested a lot of their tooling portfolio. And it's kind of up for grabs now at this point, kind of looking for an acquisition. It's kind of curious maybe that Ookla didn't look directly at that, although, maybe that's part of a expanded portfolio. Is there another company like Ookla that you think, might slide in similarly with what NetScout has to offer, or the assets formerly known as NetScout?
I don't think that a company like Ookla would be looking to do the NetScout stuff, mostly because it's physical tooling. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to them to buy a thing that they have to sell to other people. And you're probably sitting there saying, but don't they have to sell Ekahau to other people? Yes, but what Ookla gets and what Ekahau gets is brain trust. They get to share their knowledge. They get to get better at what they do on both sides of the ball. And that's going to really help.
All right, Tom. So in more perplexing news, something that's not as clearly understood, at least, I wanted to run through some of the developments that are going on with this whole Supermicro and alleged Chinese hacking story. You have to throw up all sorts of qualifiers on this because the story is now less about what Bloomberg initially reported last week and more about the response to this. In case you've been living under a rock and you haven't been hearing about this, Bloomberg Business Week came out with really a bombshell report stating that Supermicro had been infiltrated by some Chinese hackers through some of their chip making some of their server manufacturing subsidiaries. They're putting on this extremely tiny grain of rice kind of chip that was in some way intercepting, kind of memory calls to the OS, or at least that's what the report kind of was putting out there, essentially putting in a hardware backdoor on any of their servers, and stating that Amazon and Apple had kind of been aware of this, had a number of affected servers by this. So that in and of itself, huge story. An advanced persistent threat, kind of coming from one of the biggest server manufacturers out there. Then the news kind of shifted back with extremely strong rebuttals coming from Supermicro, Amazon, and Apple, and not just stating that we're investigating this and we take these concerns very seriously. That would be the typical corporate response that we would maybe see. not even something like we're not aware of anything like this, we would have wished that Bloomberg would have collaborated with us. No, they're saying that Bloomberg came to them. They told them this is not happening. It's a flat out, extremely strong denial. And these are SEC regulated statements, right? So if any of these companies are lying, they could face all sorts of legal penalties, not just fines. I mean, people could do, there are a lot of consequences if this is a misstatement this strong by any of these companies. So Tom, how can the Bloomberg report be true and also these denials be true? Because the other side of the coin of this, and I'll let you get to this in a second. Bloomberg is a crusty old publisher. They have an extremely long reputation. It seems out of character for them, especially going through their business week, maybe putting up a speculative blog post, maybe, but this was in Business Week, right? This is, tied to their entire fact-checking apparatus. Why go for the clicks now versus any other time when they could have run with any other specious, kind of story? So how can both of these be true? And what do you think the truth actually is?
Man, I don't know, because I've been trying to follow this and it just gets crazier and crazier by the day. You're right. For a company like Amazon and Apple to come out, not just with, we're looking into this, but we absolutely know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is not the case. And here's all the ways that we looked at it. And by the way, we called a lawyer for the Justice Department and they said they don't know what the hell's going on either. That's damning. Like that would make the fine for Elon Musk look like chump change. And now what you're dealing with, and I've heard crazy stories even up to today where one of the sources for the Bloomberg article may not be remembering things quite the way they thought. Now, granted, that's kind of, neither here nor there, but you're right. How can both of these things be true? Because you'd think that if, they're diametrically opposed to each other at this point. One of them has to not be true, or at least there has to be some different version of that. And I've heard all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories. I've heard that Bloomberg's trying to juice the page counts. I've heard that somebody is goosing Bloomberg to drive the stocks down because they had a short sale that they had to cover. I mean, I've heard some of the most ridiculous conspiracy theories that I've heard yet. And this is coming from someone who was like in Silicon Valley when Elon Musk decided to take a puff sell. And now look at it. I mean, you've got a company that is well regarded for security. I read an article yesterday that Tim Cook's words are coming back to bite him in the butt. Are they? I mean, realistically speaking, if Tim Cook categorically denies this from 2-3 years ago, he says there's no way that this is happening. Can we really refute what Tim Cook's saying? I mean, yeah, this is a hill. If Tim Cook is going to die on this hill that there's no spying going on, I mean, this will wreck Apple. This will destroy them if this actually turns out to be true. But the flip side is if it turns out they're juicing the stock, or if they're trying to, the invisible, not so invisible hand of the market is trying to do something, this will be the end for them.
I want to, if I want to be critical of Bloomberg, the report, when I read it, seemed extremely light on technical detail. Now, I'm assuming that was a result of they're writing for a mass audience. So, don't need to go into the technical specifications of exactly how this hack worked. However, it does open the possibility that perhaps the people that were reporting it maybe and did something out of falsehood, or did something, to just make something salacious and juicy. There was some misunderstanding of technical detail. That is the most charitable way that Bloomberg could be wrong about this while still thinking that they are right. But I thought it was interesting that Zach Whitaker over at TechCrunch said that perhaps what is happening here is that individuals, Apple has stated flatly that they are not under any kind of gag order in terms of an FBI investigation, because that was one of the other allegations that they were working with the FBI on this. They've said flatly that they're not in a gag order, but Zach Whitaker speculates that one of the challenges with reporting on national security issues like this is that perhaps individuals reported this to law enforcement, didn't go through the corporate chain of command, and now they, have been part of the FBI investigation and have been told, do not tell anyone, even within your company. Maybe it all seems. The only way it makes sense is more cloak and dagger, which I think gets us further away from what is actually happening. I think this is going to make a fantastic business thriller bestseller and or blockbuster movie in 5 years. But I just see like a crusty old editor like slamming on a desk and like, we have to go to press with this. Maybe an Oscar winner in the next couple of years. But yeah, just kind of confusing right now. And we'll have any updates that we get on the Gestalt IT Rundown going forward. One thing that isn't going forward though, Tom, is Google Plus. Google announced plans to shut down the consumer version of Google Plus. I think that leaves the door open. I know it's used in education and more as an organizational tool after a previously undisclosed security flaw was reported by the Wall Street Journal. Google's Project Strobe discovered in March that a flaw in Google Plus's API dating back to 2015 could allow a developer to see profile data marked private. That includes names, email addresses, birth dates, gender, etc. For up to roughly 500,000 Google Plus users. You can insert the joke here that is all the Google Plus users. Google has no evidence that anyone else knew of the flaw or had actually exploited it in the wild. Though the company destroys most of Google Plus's logs after 2 weeks in order to protect privacy, so it's kind of hard for them to go back and track that conveniently, I would point out to those perhaps more skeptically minded. Google says chosen not to go public with the information because it didn't meet the threshold of being able to accurately identify affected users, show evidence of misuse, or recommend actions that developers or users could take. Interestingly, Germany's data protection commissioner in Hamburg and Ireland's privacy authority both plan to do full investigations of any wrongdoing, including any GDPR consequences. Now, from my understanding of GDPR, there would have to be evidence that someone had exploited this and had pulled the data for Google to be required to report this. Tom, I'm of two minds here. On the one hand, I'm kind of sympathetic to the, okay, we discovered this, we fixed it, now we're telling you about it. Like, there's no evidence that anything went wrong. However, we're trusting someone who has a vested interest in not showing that anything went wrong with this exploit to now tell us about it.
Well, I'm still shocked that Google Plus is still a thing. I mean, that's kind of the message that I took away. Think about this. Google invested a fortune in this. Remember, for a long time, you could not sign up for a YouTube account unless you used a Google Plus account and you used your real name. Remember how big of a deal that was?
Oh, yeah.
And now in 2018, some 6 years later, you know what? We'll just shut it down. Google Plus is now the bigger crater than Google Reader ever was. Google Wave, Google, anything that Google ever made that they just randomly shut down for no reason. And now they're killing off an entire social media platform because they found a bug in it. Yeah, I get that Google is really trying to cover their ass here, because if we look at it, you've got the Germans, the Irish, and whoever else has a vested interest in gutting Google in Europe, because that's what they're doing. They're going to stake them out on an anthill at high noon and run them over with a lawnmower if they get a chance, because they want Google's guts for garters, because Google's been playing fast and loose with everything for a long time, and this is their chance. You knew about the vulnerability it's been there for years, and the only reason that nobody figured it out is because Google Plus has about as many users as you find at the community pool on a Sunday afternoon. Very few, if any. They patched it. They didn't tell anybody about it, and then their solution was not to patch it, but to shut it down because nobody's using it anyway. And you couldn't have done this any other time. This really does look like they are trying to cover their ass.
Well, and at least in my mind, I picture there is an accountant at Google that has a spreadsheet open, and they say Google Plus costs this much to operate, and it brings in whatever amount of revenue from scraping people's information and ads and stuff like that. Because there are, joke all we want that there are 500,000 users of Google Plus. I'm sure there are communities that still use it for whatever reason, and that Google is able to derive some value off of that. But I just love the idea that we found this. It's going to be a public relations nightmare. Screw it, just shut it down. Like, that literally is to me like that little bit of in the spreadsheet, they had to add one more line item, and at that point they just flipped the toggle, and everything came tumbling down. Yeah, it's frustrating that we couldn't get full disclosure on this. Again, this was pre implementation of GDPR, I believe. So they didn't even if there was an exploit, I guess they didn't technically have to report it. It would build some goodwill if they were a little bit more forthcoming with this, as opposed to being like, hey, this is an exploit, by the way, this is going away. Bye. Okay. That leaves a bad taste in the mouth. Even if if I'm a little bit sympathetic to the fact that, all right, if there's no wrongdoing, ignorance is bliss. This didn't have a wide surface area, but you're Google. You have to be better than this.
Let's be fair. Google has gone from don't be evil to don't be 100% chaotic evil at this point.
I mean, is neutral evil preferable? These are the questions we have to ask. One company that's totally not neutral evil, because I don't have a better segue than this, is Intel, and they unveiled a new 28-core workstation CPU, the Xeon W3175X, based on the Skylake Cascade Lake architecture, basically just the update to the Skylake architecture. It's not radically new. The chip runs at 3.1 gigahertz at stock frequencies, with turbo frequencies up to 4.3 gigahertz. What's really interesting here, though, completely unlocked, which is weird for more of a workstation-focused thing. Signals to me that maybe this is just going to be your consumer hero product that you just happen to have in a workstation product. It comes with it's going to run on the LGA 3647 socket, which is a server socket, but they're making more consumer-facing boards for that. Features 6-channel DDR4 memory controller capable of up to 512 gigabytes of memory. That's a lot for those keeping track. The CPU doesn't lack for I/O, offering 44 PCIe lanes on the CPU itself, with an additional 24 on the chipset, for a total of 68. Tom, does this look like a Intel Threadripper killer, or is this just is Intel still chasing AMD at this point?
Sorry, I got something caught in my throat. Mac Pro. No, this really is. The unlock part I don't care about. And the reason for that is because nobody in their right mind is going to use a server class CPU with 24 cores in their gaming machine. You know why? Most games have trouble lighting up 2 cores. I know this because I have a Ryzen 5 2600 in mine, which has 6 cores, and I barely touched the last 2. Here's what uses cores: Final Cut, Logic, Compressor, any of the Adobe suite, anything that's specifically designed for that. And that's really what this is. This is a workstation class CPU. This is the Mac Pro CPU. Let's call a spade here. That's exactly what they're trying to do. And this is trying to catch up to Threadripper. But the funny thing is that you are first in a race that nobody else is running at this point. Who in their right mind needs 32 cores to do anything? I played with an iMac Pro at the Apple Store. I fed it an 8K render file and watched the CPUs just go doop, and that's it. And that's on a 10-core workstation. Now you're giving me twice as many cores and then some in an Intel box? I don't see the appeal. I don't see where this is going to take off at all. You've literally done this. People who gamed are down here. They want 3-4 cores at the most and a crapload of RAM and NVMe drives. Up here in workstation land, do you know what they care more about than anything else? As long as I can render everything, I want a really big monitor. That's it. That's it.
Well, so what's interesting here, obviously this involves bragging rights, right? It doesn't beat the top end Threadripper on core levels. It does, which comes in at 32 and 64, 32 cores, 64 threads. It does beat it in PCIe. So I do think that is actually important in a workstation class thing, where you are going to be hooking up, theoretically a lot of NVMe drives. You're going to be doing some advanced acceleration cards, whether they're GPUs or other kind of slot-in cards. So I do think that in and of itself is interesting. But the big story here to me is that this is hey, don't look at the fact that this is essentially still on Skylake architecture. It's probably going to be on their 14 nanometer process, which Intel seems like they literally can't get off of at this point. And this is hey, don't look at the fact that we can't iterate on that. Is it a technical accomplishment to put 28 Intel cores on a single chip? Sure. That's awesome. I do agree. What is the workload? I mean, I guess theoretically, if you want to render 8K video while you're playing a game at 4K, while you're, running Open Broadcast Studio on Twitch, sure. This is the CPU maybe for you. I don't know. I'm be interested when this officially comes out. No word on pricing significantly. I know the top end Threadripper is like $1,600 or something ridiculous. So I'm sure this will easily top 2K if I know Intel's pricing conventions.
Well, here's the other thing you got to think about too is that mobile devices, I mean, the new iPhone 10s is on a 7 nanometer process. So they're already half the size of what Intel's on. And I know that Intel's having a huge problem with 10 nanometer because they can't get the yields up on the CPUs. So I think what Intel's doing is they're like, okay, if we're stalled out at 14 nanometer, we might as well make this thing as big as we can because there's no chance in hell that we're going to be able to get a 10 nanometer that makes sense.
Well, and there was a recent report, I think it was in Antec, saying that the processor on the, was it the A11 on the XS, or I'm sorry, the 10S, effectively has a per core performance that is almost equivalent to top end x86. Now, whether you, however you're going to get to use that, it's, in a weird, kind of big little configuration. So it's never going to be an apples to apples comparison there. But, Intel, good, again, I'm happy for you that you put all the cores on. Let's maybe just shrink the process now a little bit, increase the per core performance, decrease the power. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's not be too negative. Let's save our negativity for Microsoft. On October 9th, Microsoft re-released their planned Windows 10 October 2018 update. The re-release was needed due to reports of personal data being deleted after the update was initially released. The issue seems to have come from users using the known folder redirection feature. Essentially, this lets you take the My Documents or My Videos folders and set a custom location that's different than the default that Microsoft gives you. If you want to be difficult, fine, you're special, you use this feature. The update was effectively attempting to remove duplicate and empty folders. Unfortunately, some of the redirected folders were flagged as this, and personal data was getting deleted. I know Microsoft was directing people to call 1-800-Microsoft. I'm not joking about this, if they experienced data loss, to help them remediate the situation. But they've now evidently fixed it and are re-releasing the October update. But Tom, are these kind of small but persistent bugs? They're not small for the affected users, but the number of users affected was small. Are these kind of bugs kind of the price for a continuously updating OS? And will we ever reach a breaking point on this?
Well, it looks like Microsoft forgot to read from the Book of Storage, and I quote the prophet Stephen Foskett, Commandment 1, thou shalt not lose data. Now, here's the problem. Microsoft tried to do too much too fast. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the Fall Creator Update or whatever they're calling it now that is good, but you tried to do too much. Oh, hey, let's just go get rid of some duplicate files. What's the worst thing that can happen? I don't know. I have 17 files on my desktop named readme.txt. They're all different. But you're right. This is the problem that we've run into for a very long time, and I'm seeing it in networking, and I know the people in systems are seeing it too. CI/CD, continuous improvement, continuous deployment, continuous development. You run into the risk of systemic bugs introducing themselves into the process and not getting rooted out. How many times have we heard about, oh, we patched that bug and it got reintroduced in a different pipeline? Or, hey, we probably shouldn't have released it this fast, but we were under pressure to get this out the door because the Fall Creator Update doesn't make sense to release in December. See, now you're running into the issue of, and this is a problem that bit Apple in the ass this year too. How many new features did we get in Mojave and iOS 12? Not many. You know why? Because they specifically said, we're releasing things too fast. We have to release yearly cadence. We're concentrating on fixing the broken crap this year. So now we're going back to the tick-tock methodology of new stuff, fix the broken stuff. New stuff, fix the broken stuff. Which works really well if you're on Snow Leopard or High Sierra or any of the platforms that were basically designed for that talk mentality. But what you run into is if you are still on that release cadence, if you still think that you have to make this, one of these days, you're going to make a really terrible decision and you're going to try to put something in that shouldn't be there. Look at Group FaceTime. Group FaceTime got cut early on. Why? Because they knew there was no way they could make that release. And with Office going to a quarterly release cadence, with Windows going to a quarterly release cadence, you're going to start running into these problems. And is it the problem of the software developers? Maybe. Is it the problem of the project managers? More likely that's the case. They're trying to get, they're making cut lines too quickly. But maybe we don't need software releases every quarter. Maybe we could do them every 6 months and things will be perfectly fine.
Well, and I think it's less a problem of aggressive release cycles and more of a, how are you incentivizing your users to implement these? Because yes, you should always, patch all the things. I know it's good security practice, right? But the issue is if Microsoft makes it very, very easy to just roll these updates constantly. And
Mhm.
given the problem that Microsoft has traditionally had with getting people to update to the latest and being affected by all these legacy bugs, I completely understand why they are doing that. I think Apple at least has a slightly better approach. Yes, you get the annoying pop-up, in your notifications every other day or something like that when there's a new update to roll out. But that's not for like big updates. When a Mojave comes out and stuff like that, it's not quite in your face as of yet. They still give you the release. They still roll it out to everybody at the same day. They would love for you to install it, I'm sure, but there's a little bit less of a push there, and it's more about pulling users into that. So I think, and what's interesting to me is I'm like beta software guy. If you release a buggy, terrible piece of software, but it has one new feature on it, I'm going to install it and suffer through it, and get bit every now and then on that. And I don't mind that. But as I've we recently did a piece kind of covering kind of the rise of vVols within vCenter, and that's something that's been released for forever, but because what was it, vSphere 5.5 or whatever like that didn't have that, and it was a super rock solid release, everyone held on to that for dear life until it got end of life, and are just slowly starting to go to 6.0, where that's now a feature, and everyone's like, oh yeah, we can now do this. And I think in the past I've been very critical of that kind of mentality, but when you got stuff to do, whether you're a consumer or you're an enterprise, if it's still working, I don't want to be the guy that's still running IE6 because my broken Office app requires it. But at a certain point, you gotta get the work done. I don't know. I do think Microsoft maybe needs to modulate again, how pushy they are with their updates.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's going to just about do it today for the Gestalt IT Rundown, Tom. Thank you so much for being on once again. What are you up to right now, and where can people find more of your fine writing?
So we're working hard on closing out 2018 with some great Tech Field Day events. If you want to hear and see a little bit more about that, head over to techfieldday.com. That's pretty much my Bruce Wayne job. The Batman job is when I get those phone calls at 9:30 in the morning from people going, "Hey, guess what just happened to us?" And you can read some more of that writing over at gestaltit.com. We got some more great stuff coming up there as well. If you want to follow my stream of consciousness snark, head over to Twitter. I'm at Networking Nerd there.
All right. Yes. And while you're at gestaltit.com, check out our coverage from Commvault Go. We're doing a couple of live blogs from there. We just did one today. We're going to have another one going up at 8:30 Central Time. So check that out. We got Stephen Foskett and Luigi Danicos out there doing those live blogs. We got some videos up from there, doing some interviews, some interesting stuff coming out from Commvault. I know, you hear Commvault, maybe you think, oh, this, they're a legacy player in the backup and recovery space, doing some very interesting new data management, some interesting service model changes. So check that out, gestaltit.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Anthropology. So I think that's going to finish us out here, Tom. So until the next time we meet, have a super sparkly day.